must constantly look at things in a different way.
The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast was created by two physical therapists out of the desire to learn more about the different educational roles in physical therapy and healthcare, and how healthcare education works by talking with educational leaders and people with different perspectives within physical therapy and across interdisciplinary lines on how education can be improved to disrupt the status quo of healthcare education. This is our journey, and thanks for listening. Are you a third-year physical therapy student that excels on tests when you have study guides, checklists, and deadlines? With all of the information available about how to prepare for the NPTE, it's easy to get disorganized and not feel prepared going into the big day. NPTE Prep Success is an online course that provides PT students easy-to-use study guides and step-by-step guidance through the NPTE preparation. To learn more, visit kylericeprep.com. Thank you again all for your continued support. And now for the show.
And welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, F. Scott Field, and I'm thrilled as always to be joined by my co-hosts, Stephanie Wyrock and Brandon Pone. Today we have two very special guests on to talk about an interesting topic of international teaching and teaching overseas. Tonight we have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Ricardo Fernandez and Dr. Mike Connors. Gentlemen, we're so thrilled to have you guys on the show. Ricardo, it's your second time now. Happy anniversary. About 1 year ago we released your episode. So Mike, for our listeners who may not know you, could you give them a little bit of background on your academic and international education journeys and how they've kind of led you to where you are today? And then Ricardo will let you give our audience a brief reminder of who you are and how you got to be where you are.
Well, thank you so much again for allowing me to participate in this interview. It's really always a great experience to talk to different people with all different backgrounds and experiences. My path through international teaching was kind of by accident. Was teaching full-time at the University of North Texas in the entry-level DPT program in Fort Worth, and had a coworker that had some international collaboration connections to China, of all places. And an opportunity arose in Shanghai about three years ago. And Hal was the faculty member colleague, came to me and said, "Hey, Mike, you want to go to China?" I was, okay, let's check it out. So at the time I was nearing completion of my PhD. And so enjoying teaching and enjoying kind of the idea of being able to do some international collaboration. So two of us went over to Shanghai, spent 6 days there, taught, I think, for 2 full days. A year later, was invited to Xi'an, China, to an international orthopedic conference. And actually on Thursday morning, I'm heading back there again to present at the same conference again this year.
Very cool. Very cool. And Ricardo, how about you? Can you give our audience an update from your standpoint of your educational journey and how it brought you to international teaching?
Sure. Thank you. And thanks again for having me again. Happy anniversary to me, I guess. A year ago, about today, I was on here. So thank you for having me. I first started back in 2005. Again, one of my coworkers, a faculty member, I was at Northwestern at the time, said there's an opportunity in Peru. And my name is Ricardo Fernandez. I guess she thought I spoke Spanish, but I don't. But she said there's an opportunity to go over to Peru, and for 2 weeks I went. I absolutely loved it. The people are fantastic. They're very eager to learn. They had a lot of room for improvement, so a little bit that we did for them made a big difference. And that's with Health Volunteers Overseas. They have part of it is in the clinic, like a CI teaching, and part of it is lectures. So after that, I really became hooked. So I went back to Peru a couple years afterwards, did a lecture, and I saw a lot of things that we did were being carried over, and they made a lot of changes. So it really made you feel good that what you did there kind of made a difference. So then another group of us, we went to Honduras, and like 17 clinicians, fantastic. Went back to Aruba, did some teaching. Then I went to Ethiopia. We were trying to start a DPT program. Ethiopia, a lot of things didn't work out like it was supposed to, but it was still a good learning experience for myself. I went to Vietnam for 2 weeks, and just recently just got back from Nicaragua earlier this year. So that's been my international teaching that I've done.
Wow. I mean, it's really remarkable to hear just the variety and the diversity between all the different types of overseas educational experiences that you guys have had. I mean,
And especially, I'm kind of curious with this, Ricardo, since you've been in Peru twice, even though you said you don't speak Spanish, have you picked up a little bit since then?
Yeah, I know little physical therapy terms like boca arriba and boca abajo.
The simple ones.
Simple phrases, yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot of that in Texas. Dolor, mucho,
Yeah.
poquito, rápido.
We are so Americanized Spanish right now. It's unbelievable. But that's okay, though. It's all good. So, I mean, guys, it's just fascinating to hear how that started. I mean, with Mike, from you saying that totally you didn't even plan on going to China, and then this opportunity came up, like, well, let's go. And then it's turned into just repeated trips and really good experiences for both of you. So I think that's really good to hear. So I guess let's dive in a little bit deeper on this here. So I know you guys had kind of mentioned, Ricardo, you had mentioned a little bit of this too, but how have you both seen the profession of physical therapy translate? And yes, that's a pun intended. It's a poor joke, so you'll see my humor here. How have you seen the profession of PT translate into these respective countries that you guys have taught in? And what are some things that you think is the next step for those countries?
I think for me, it was a real eye-opener to see the level of where the profession of physical therapy exists in China. It's a relatively new profession, at least as it is being integrated more into mainstream rehabilitation in mainland China. There's a PT school in Taiwan, I believe, is really the only exposure that they have in terms of an educational preparation on that side of Asia. So it was interesting to go in. Rehab very much is owned by what we would consider in the US to be physiatrists. They're called rehab physicians, essentially functioning very much the way we do at the DPT level, only with prescriptive delegation and things like that. So seeing the level of practice of physical therapists in Shanghai especially was really more of like a bachelor's trained therapist in the sense of very technical, almost PT assistant like, more in terms of just a lot of hands-on, a lot of very technical focused interventions, not necessarily the level of reasoning that we experience a lot in the States, but more or less like, see this problem, do this, see this problem, do this. So very, what's the word, algorithm based, instead of more of like the clinical processing, clinical reasoning type of practice that we see here. But overall, I mean, very collaborative, willing to learn from one another. The attraction of the Chinese government to bring physical therapists in from the UK and the US is pretty strong to advance the physical therapist side of practice and foster more of the collaboration between the rehab physicians and the physical therapists, less of a prescriptive delegation model, more of a collaborative model. So it was fun and exciting to be part of that.
When I went to Peru, I was the first physical therapist from HVO to go there, and there's since been over 80. So when I went the first time, I prepared these lectures, and I didn't really know what to expect. And I had to change everything because when I walk into the hospital, and on the floor are all these mattresses on the floor, and everyone's laying down doing straight leg raises. So I said, well, what's wrong with this person? Oh, they have a hip replacement 16 months ago. How about this person? Oh, they had an ACL done 6 months ago. How about this one? A total knee 4 months ago. I'm like, why is everyone laying on the floor doing leg raises? I said, well, that's the protocol. So they thought that they had to do strengthening on the table, or in this case, the floor first, before they could do any functional activities. So I had to really kind of push the envelope a lot and help them understand that this person walked into the clinic, was standing outside for an hour, so they could probably do some standing exercise. We had to break away from just what they see in a book. They have a book that is like very sacred. The therapists all go to the book and look at the different exercises, but they're all pretty outdated and not very functional. So after scaring them with doing standing exercises, I returned a couple years later, and the mattresses were off the floor. It was awesome. They took phone books, and they wrapped them in cellophane and made different size steps. They made a treadmill out of pipes so you could walk on a treadmill. They really started thinking functional. And so it was really exciting to see that the therapists can learn that they can think on their feet and can adapt the exercises. So it was just pretty interesting to see how they progressed from the first year to 3 years later to the other therapists coming and educating them on function and different tests they can do. It was really pretty cool to see the progress with the physical therapist there.
Wow. I mean, that's really interesting that was kind of the experience from both of you. And, kind of that you've gone through that, Ricardo, that prompts kind of a follow-up question here to both of you guys. So from what you guys know, and I know, Ricardo, you did a lot of countries on this one, so I know this answer might be a long one, but what is kind of like the overall educational process in school for the therapists in these countries, just to give some context?
Yeah, well, in Peru, they're physical therapists, but they're a little bit behind what we do here in the States, probably a good 20 plus years behind what we have here. In Vietnam, they're physical therapists as well. There's a school, they get education. And Honduras, that's a lot different. Nicaragua is not really too much. There is a school in Managua, but a lot of physical therapists work more like aides or techs, it seems. So they're just the brightest person in the area that helps take over. Vietnam was loaded with family members doing treatment. So it'd be one physical therapist supervising, but a lot of family members are training. They're carrying the patients into the room in the hospital. They're adapting lawn chairs into wheelchairs to wheel them in. They're very actively involved in the treatment. So the physical therapist is kind of guiding the family members. In Ethiopia, there's a real shortage of physical therapists. So we try to get a DPT program going with 70 million people. There's a couple hundred physical therapists only. So they don't make much money. So they try to do a lot of different jobs, but there's just not enough room for the physical therapists to see that many people. So it's the variance of different type of degrees and who takes over for the physical therapist.
Yeah. And Ricardo, do they have any like specific, like, is there an organization like we have CAPTI here in the States that works on accreditation? Is there anything like that exists for any of those programs where you taught it?
Yeah. The hospital in Ethiopia was in charge of giving us final permission to get to the DPTs, but unfortunately, a lot of the countries like in Africa, they're very poor and they try to get more money out of us. So they just kept wanting more money to approve it, but they don't really know too much about the accreditation process. In Peru, the SLUD was the group we work with. They were very much controlling of what the therapist did when they came in. They're very involved with the process. So it really kind of varies. Either really trying to micromanage, but not really knowing what they're doing, versus do whatever you can to try to help us.
Wow, that's really interesting. Mike, how about you from the China perspective on kind of what their education entails and your knowledge of their accreditation process?
Yeah, so I know that they're mostly at a bachelor's to master's level. The one program in Taiwan is a master's level. And I'm not aware of any accreditation standards other than the government overseeing and controlling their educational experience and curriculum. But as far as, the ability to practice at any level consistent with our CAPTI standards or anything like that, they're nowhere near it.
I think it's interesting that every country is so unique. I mean, in the United States, we just kind of think that, at least this is my perspective, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but we're so used to what we do here in the United States that we maybe don't think about how it differs from other country to other country. I'm curious to know, I know, Mike, you had talked a little bit about how you ended up in China teaching, but what drove you guys to explore these international teaching opportunities?
I think more than anything, curiosity. You look at global physio now where we're connected via podcasts and social media and we're interacting with colleagues on a global scale more than ever. And, you're presented with a country where nothing about the practice of physical therapy in that country. Very little, at least at the time, I knew very little about China other than it was on the far side of the world, 7,000 miles away from Dallas-Fort Worth. And, that it would take 22 hours by flight to get there. And, was intrigued by the opportunity that I could learn not just from other colleagues around the world, but that there's something that potentially from my experience and knowledge base that I could share. And kind of that old adage, I think why a lot of us get into teaching, I can treat one patient at a time and I can impact one patient's life and function at a time, or I can teach others to do something similar and then have that much more bandwidth at how I impact the profession and society as a whole. So when given that opportunity combined with just professional curiosity and the bug to travel anywhere that someone's paying for, I'm more than happy to take advantage of that situation and to explore a country that I think is not well understood or well known in terms of its of how it exists medically, but it has one of the most fascinating medical models I've ever been exposed to.
Yeah, my first word was going to be my curiosity. And when you go and experience these different cultures, you learn a lot about other cultures, but also yourself. And it's neat to see what people can do with what they have. They really make use of their local resources, whether it be family members. I mean, as soon as you get off the plane in Peru, it's different than the United States. There's 6 generations of families, it seems, all waiting for people to get off the plane. And they might have flew from Peru to Peru, but grandma's there, grandpa's there, cousins there, the kids are there. It's so different when you walk into these different cultures, and it's fun to learn. And it's really fun to learn about how people deal with the problems that we see. They see shoulder impingement, they see femoral pain, they see the same kind of things. And it's nice to learn about other cultures and other ways to treat. Plus, it's a lot more difficult, I think, when we're used to having electricity that works and access to a computer. You have to think on your feet a lot more. You have to not use so much slang when you speak. You have to slow down your jokes when you're giving a joke, because it has to be translated into another language. And it's awesome to see different cultures. And it's really, I've always been welcome. So everywhere I've gone, they know I'm American. They know I do things like the OK sign, which is a slang in Peru. It means something really bad, but I'm trying to help out, and they know, and they cut me some slack that I didn't mean what they think it means. They all know I'm not from there. When I was in Ethiopia, they call me Farange, which means foreigner, or white, or rich. It means all the same thing there. But they do it with like tongue-in-cheek kind of laugh, and they accept you for what you have. I thought we were highly respected. Our knowledge from a physical therapist in the States is like, wow, you guys are amazing what you can do. And it's really humbling to walk in and talk about how I have a clinic, and they can't even fathom, what I talk about at our facilities. But I love it. I love the experiencing the cultures and just being open to new ideas and meeting different people. We're so much alike that it's kind of surprising sometimes, even though 7,000 miles away, a lot of similarities.
Yeah, Ricardo, I ran into that a little bit in the States, actually, when I was in Hawaii doing some home health. A lot of the Pacific Islanders there called me a haole, which was like slang for white guy. And they were kind of standoffish until you got grandma up and walking and feeling better. And then all of a sudden you were part of the family, and they welcomed you in and wanted to feed you and give you gifts and stuff. And it was really, truly an amazing experience. And that was here in the States, So, I mean, it's interesting to see those cultural differences. But speaking of different ways to teach and learn, what is something that you guys would say that you learned teaching abroad that maybe you brought back and implemented in the United States?
Well, I think for myself, I really opened myself to other cultures and other healthcare delivery systems. For me, trying to see what is important. So at a home program, for example, why am I giving this exercise, and how do I educate the person? So it really helps kind of simplify things. And I think those are things that work the best. Sometimes with technology and stuff, we get a little carried away. But I think for me, stepping back and just trying to keep it simple kind of helps my treatments even here. I think about what would they be doing in Peru if they didn't have someone's on my bike I want to get on. What would I do? I could do a different exercise. But I think also globally, it really makes me more aware of what's going on in the world. So I was in Nicaragua in January, and we brought 40 students there. It was fantastic, great experience. January. In April, the President Ortega changed some things with the Social Security. Now there's riots, there's protests, there's so much going on. And for me, it's just to be more aware of what's happening in Central America, one of the poorest countries, because I was there. So I go and I think back of what it was like to go door to door with scorpions hopping in people's backpacks. And I almost got ran over by a runaway horse on a cart. So I got saved by my interpreter. But the things that you can't even imagine are a problem. Going from the university to the clinic, is there a clinic? It really makes me appreciate what I have in the States, but also not to forget what's important, like the relationships between a patient and a therapist. So I think it really makes you think that besides all the bells and whistles we have, those relationships are very important to have with our patients.
No, absolutely. I think what it also reminded me is keep it simple. I mean, we get lost in these complex interventions and these toys that we have, and you go overseas and they don't necessarily have, the level of toys and of tools that we have here. And they really do focus on keeping it simple. I mean, the basic interventions, the basic tools at their disposal, from a Chinese perspective, 3,000 years of history with manual therapy and acupuncture, and then Chinese herbs. And the other thing I think I really appreciated was collaboration. The medical model that I was exposed to in Shanghai was really one. The hospital was an integrated Eastern-Western hospital. And so every patient that was admitted was given or assigned to a Western medicine physician and an Eastern medicine physician. And so they were encouraged to collaborate with a combination of Eastern philosophy of herbs and traditional Chinese medicine and things like that, with a Western perspective focused more on, the medication management and things like that. So it gave me more appreciation coming back and saying, if they're doing this in a country where collaboration is difficult just because of beliefs and geography and all kinds of other reasons, then really collaboration for us should be a lot easier. And I think the last thing it taught me was just slow down and appreciate the patient's perspective that much more. Think about what the patient is bringing to the table, the extended family, to Ricardo's point, the baggage that they're bringing as part of their experience, and not just what you feel is in their best interest, and then making it really more patient specific, focused on the specific needs of the patient, not just some functional algorithm that I feel like that's important, like a straight leg raise or something like that, but what's really functional for them. It's a big thing in China. Toilets are on the floor, literally. So squatting is a big thing there. So, the ability to really focus on getting someone down on the floor, even at 80 years old. So it's those little nuances that I think a lot of times we think of as, well, why would I get my 80-year-old post-total hip patient on the floor? Because it's functional. And really just that reminder that age isn't necessarily a predictor of function. My best memory was I went for a walk in Shanghai, like the third day I was there, just a random local park, and no park benches anywhere in the park. And like third or fourth lap walking around, looked up and I saw this group of probably 70 to 80 something year old females that were just like talking to each other in this little circle, and all were in full squat, butt to grass. It was unreal. And they got in and out of that, chasing after little ones like it was nothing. And it really gave me that appreciation for the fact that, we put induced constraints on our patients because we feel like, from a paternalistic perspective, we know what's best for our patients given their age and their level of function. It's like, you know what? Remove the barriers of fear from movement, stand back and really watch what patients can do, because it's pretty darn amazing.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point, that really given the context of their culture and their lifestyle, seeing what's really functional for them. I think that's a very, very important point, Mike, to bring up. And I like how you guys had mentioned some points between the two of you that you think that you've kind of learned to bring back, is kind of focusing more on collaboration, getting better with that, and seeing those models that work, keeping it simple for the patients and their families when it comes to explanations, being able to be very adaptive. Because obviously, of course, there's a good chance we're not going to have the same amount of technology and resources necessarily overseas in certain environments compared to here in the States, and especially also to slow down and make sure we get their perspective. So I think those are some really, really good points that you both bring forward here. So now that knowing that you both have kind of gone through a couple trips within these countries and such, what direction do you each see the profession of PT going on in the respective countries that you've taught in?
I see it continuing to evolve and advance. I mean, the nice thing about a profession that's more or less, I don't want to say in its infancy, but that is yet determined by an educational degree or process like in the States. I mean, our practice is pretty well defined by our educational preparation and kind of the status of where our respective practice acts are throughout the country. But to be in a situation where really it's pretty open-ended. So I see a significant potential for evolution in China as the rehab physicians realize that without physical, occupational and speech therapists, they can't meet the needs of their significant growing and aging population, that there's going to be more opportunities for therapists, especially PTs, to step into that functional mobility enhancement role and really function more as primary care providers in the sense of driving that process instead of, the old prescriptive model where a physician evaluates the patient, they determine what they feel is the patient's need for improvement, and then they're prescribing, for lack of a better phrase, the plan of care to the therapist, whereas they'll take on more of the the onus on directing the patient's care and sitting in the driver's seat. And I also see that probably sometime in the next maybe 15 to 20 years, their educational process evolving beyond the master's degree into the DPT. I know, to Ricardo's point, there's been some efforts from different groups to go into the country to develop DPT programs, but in a country where the government does control a lot of the, actually all of the educational programs, it really is working in collaboration with the government and trying to convince the powers that be that the evolution of this profession to this degree is not only worth the investment, but also is in the best interest of not only the practitioner, but also the patients that they serve.
Yeah, what I noticed with the different countries, the therapists are very thirsty for knowledge. So when we have our meetings, everyone comes. Everyone has a pen and paper out. Everyone is actively listening. They all want to improve. And they know that they have some things where their deficits are, but they want to take that next step. So it's kind of interesting because usually we follow, like in Peru, we had 80 different therapists come. In Vietnam, about 80 also. So you could tell the person that came last was a hand specialist. They had their own little things, and they knew all the details of how this person said they should treat a hand injury, for example. So very much eager. They ask a lot of questions. They know they have deficits, and they know what they want to get to. A lot of the governments are in control of the healthcare. Like Peru, all the therapists have to work for the government. Then they go on their side and they make their money. Same thing with Ethiopia. They all work at the hospital, but then on the side they make their money by doing their clinics or home health. But I think one of the things I really would say is that they really are interested in learning. And whether it be in a clinic situation where they're treating patients, you walk up to them, they don't hide, they ask questions. Can you show me how I'm doing this? Give me feedback. Am my hand okay? Am I pulling hard enough? They want to learn. And when you do the lectures, they're totally paying attention. And I think in the future, with this thirst for knowledge, as they start to get access to online or more articles, they're going to improve their practice, and they're going to step up instead of being more like how we were, get the scripts from the doctor to swarm, short wave infrared massage, or hum, hot pack ultrasound massage. We only could do that. That's where they are now, I think, but they're starting to learn there's a lot of things they can do to improve function, and they're winning over the patients. The family members are definitely on board. They see progress, and they want to see a physical therapist. So I think the future looks very bright for physical therapists in the countries that I've been in, as far as progressing to more like how we are here, with ability to reach more people.
Yeah, I feel like that, especially in its infancy, that physical therapy can really only grow. I mean, especially in a place where functional mobility is so incredibly important. Mike, you had talked about how, squatting is a really important functional skill for people in China to do. And Ricardo, you had talked about how, you have a translator with you when you're teaching these classes. I'm extremely interested in understanding how you guys handle these language barriers and these cultural barriers in these foreign countries, because like you said, Ricardo, if you do the okay sign and that totally offends somebody, like that could really impact your message that you're trying to deliver. So I'm wondering kind of how you guys have dealt with that.
Well, I think it's very important to do your homework. So before I went into these countries, I looked at other trip reports. So other therapists have been there. Vietnam, I was about the 80th therapist. So I read what things worked, what things didn't work. What did the therapist like? What did they not like? So you don't want to ever point at a therapist. That's threatening. So you learn, don't ever point. Don't ever point with your foot. That's really insulting in Vietnam. And don't touch the head. So you kind of find some basic things that are no-nos, and you try to understand and do your homework and know what not to do. And then you listen. And if you make mistakes, like the okay sign, people laugh because they know that I didn't mean anything by it. The context wasn't there, but they pull me aside and say, please don't do that anymore. That means something really bad here. Then they'd laugh. Yeah, you just have to be open. In Ethiopia, when I was there, they took me out to lunch. And so to show their respect for me, they fed me by hand. So it's called gursha. They'd ball up the food with their fingers and they'd stick it in my mouth. And so the only food I ate in Ethiopia on lunch was what was put in my mouth by the other therapist. So you have to be open. So I knew that was coming. So I did my research. I knew that was a sign of respect. So I knew that eventually I was going to have to lick someone's salty little fingers and eat the food. But I have to do that to show that I appreciate what they're giving me. Like Michael said, they want to give you gifts. When I was in Peru, they're bringing me live chickens. They were making food for me. It's so humbling, and it's such an honor. So you want to receive some of these gifts, but you don't want to offend anybody. So you have to do your homework. You have to play it by ear. And they cut you a lot of slack because we're Americans, but a lot of Americans can't find places on maps. So they cut us a lot of slack. And if you come in there with a good heart, you're trying, you're open, you're respectful, you're going to be received well. And so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Interpreter, very important. My interpreter, fantastic. She not only helped me in the hospital in Peru, for example, but to get a cab. She would hide me, say, hide over here. She'd go negotiate the price, pull me out, and then the gringo price is there. So they'd be like, oh, no, I could have got double. I got a gringo. But it was nice having someone that would show you the ropes for the community. And usually they tell you places not to go, places you can go. They would negotiate. If you want a souvenir, they would help you with that because they want to take advantage of the foreigner price. So I think with the customs, you do your homework, you research about it, you listen to other therapists that have been there, keep your ears open, watch how they respond to you, and just avoid the no-nos and be open to new ideas.
No, I think 100% of what Ricardo said. I mean, you really, you try to do a little bit of the preparation ahead of time, and then you just have to be really attentive. Be open-minded, go into the experience with the idea that you're a guest, just like if you're a guest in someone's house or home, that you were invited there for a specific purpose, that you're very appreciative. I can think of a dozen examples, not necessarily being fed, but just of dishes where in a million years, I wouldn't even think to order from a menu, like half a live shrimp and, just things that you're like, no, in America, that's not on a Chinese food menu, but it's just those customs that they have and those traditions, and you try to just roll with it. My first trip really was an eye-opening experience. Like, okay, I'm going to go into this very open-minded, very willing to try new experiences, and then just this second trip, and now going this third time, just rolling with it. I'm for the second time this year, I'm going by myself, meeting a translator at the airport. Have no idea where I'm staying. I'm totally fine with it as I was last year at this time, just because it's like, okay, I have a ticket to go to Xi'an, China. I know I'm going to be there from this day to this date. I know what my lectures are because they're prepared ahead of time. I've worked with the interpreter. The first time I went, I had a phenomenal interpreter in Shanghai. Last year in Xi'an, the interpreter knew about as much English as I know Mandarin, which is to say very little. So we had lots of charades and lots of, just trying to conceptualize what we were, trying to get across to each other. But at the end of the day, if you go over with a very open mind, to Ricardo's point, an open heart, why you're going, what you hope to gain from that experience, what you hope to leave them with, I think you'll find that, when you're invited to do those kind of things, they're very receptive to you. Even as an American, where you're going in possibly with some some preconceived beliefs on their side about the way Americans behave. I think we do a lot in terms of diplomacy just by rebuking a lot of those, myths around the way Americans tend to act overseas. And we just, you go over there, open mind, open heart, willing to learn from each other, and just leaving there knowing that you're better as an individual and as a professional for having had that experience, and they're better in some instance for having experienced the time with you and the knowledge that you shared with them.
Just one more story there. When I was in Vietnam, I definitely am tall and definitely look American, but I'd go out to the restaurant at night and the young girls would come up to me and ask to go bike riding with me. So the first night they asked me, and I said, well, I'm married. I don't, want to go bike riding. Second night they asked me. So the third day I went to my therapist at the clinic. I'm like, what is with the girls asking me out bike riding? What do they want? Oh, they want to practice their English. So they just want to go riding bikes and show you the area. You should do it. So I'm like, okay, I felt a little uncomfortable, but I went. It's fantastic. I went in the countryside, just rode pedal bikes around, and they took me in different homes and showed me things that I probably wouldn't have seen. And so my comfort level for me as an American is like, I got to be careful. I don't want to get in an uncompromising situation. But I let that go, and it was a fantastic experience. And everyone recognizes you from the hospital. Everyone tells everybody there's an American at the hospital. So you walk out and you get good treatments everywhere you go. And everyone wants to show you how wonderful their country is. They're very proud of their food and their culture. And if you're willing to eat half live shrimp, and I ate guinea pig in Peru, that was their thing, cuy, it really helps them receive you as well. So I agree. Great experience. If you have a good attitude like you have, just give me what you got and I'm ready for it. You're going to love it.
Yeah, local celebrity status, you guys. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
So what would you guys recommend to a healthcare student or new grad maybe who might be interested in teaching abroad? How should they look to get started? Mike, I know you mentioned some financing tips. What would you guys recommend?
So I would try to research some of what the international collaborations that are already out there. I mean, if there's an organization, to Ricardo's point, that fosters that sort of collaboration, that's an in. There's already an established relationship or an established conduit to plug people in with certain expertise. I think a lot of that comes about organically too and naturally. In my circumstance, literally fell into it, wasn't looking for it, was always open to the idea of international collaboration. I know more and more opportunities are being created through social media contacts. I have a therapist I work with who somehow established a relationship with the British Chiropractic Association. And this last spring break was flown over to present at their conference and is going to Australia, I think, next year to present at a different conference. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. You have to be willing. You have to put yourself out there in a very objective, collaborative way. It saddens me every time I log on to social media, and I kind of do it holding my breath these days at the way we interact with each other as global physios, because I think very much it's more like watching my kids fight on the playground. It's not necessarily a collaborative. It's, oh, F. Scott, you said this, and I think this, and Brandon thinks this, and Ricardo thinks this, and Stephanie thinks this, and well, hell, I'm right, and you're all wrong. So, I need to tell you how wrong you really are, instead of, we all have different perspectives and backgrounds and trainings, and the healthy respect and collaboration that we can all take part in and learn from each other actually makes us better at serving our patients. I'm amazed at how much better listening I was coming back to patient care from every China trip because of the interpreter. I had to force myself to listen because a lot of times their English is not very good and my Mandarin is horrible. So if I want to have any sort of dialogue, that just makes me focus that much more on my active listening ability and even bringing that back. So, if there's a health education student or a new grad or even an experienced professional that's interested in these kind of experiences, don't be passive. They're not going to fall in your lap largely. Seek them out. Don't be afraid of them. Go into it with an open mind. You don't need to be an expert in the language. I still only know like 5 Mandarin words. Maybe Ricardo's learned more Spanish by now. Maybe a little Vietnamese. But, I know Ni Hao Ma is how are you? And you don't need to be an expert. I think the other thing, to Ricardo's point, that goes a long way, taking, even an hour of your time before you go, not just learning about the trip, but learning something about their language and culture. When you can go to a country as an American and you've shown and demonstrated that you've taken the time to learn about them, I mean, they value that more than most of us, I think, would appreciate. And even if it's something simple as, hi, how are you, in their native language, you get up in front of that group and you show that you're not just there to spew the knowledge on them that you've been or garnered in your career, but you're willing to learn about them and meet them where they are. But just be open. I think that's the best advice. Seek it out, put yourself out there, talk to people that have those kind of collaborations and that are willing to be the connector, and then just take the leap. Like I said, sometimes you go halfway across the world. My wife and my family think I'm crazy, again, for going to a country I speak no language. I know nothing. I don't even know who I'm meeting at the airport. And to just take a leap of faith. I mean, you can have some really cool experiences. I've learned how to navigate their Facebook as WeChat. I still connect with people through that medium. I was talking to a global physio today. So it's just really, really cool opportunities.
Yeah, yes, excellent points. And what I'm thinking is really important is a sense of humor. And when I was in Peru, for example, I did my homework and I really was prepared. But when I was there, my sister was my first translator. She quit at the first morning. She's a school teacher. She speaks Spanish well, but she didn't like the anatomy words. She didn't like being touched, so she quit. So I got a better one, but than my sister. But the second day, there was a bomb in my hotel. So my hotel was evacuated. There's police tape around it. The fourth day, there was an earthquake. I was in 2 car accidents in Peru, and you got to laugh it off. So I thought it was kind of, just rolling with, I'm fine, I'm making it. I called my wife finally after like the 9th day, and I told her this stuff. She was scared to death because she was at home and thinking the worst. But I think you need a sense of humor. So when you go to these places, don't take yourself too seriously. If you have a treatment plan, it's going to be thrown out the window. You might not get picked up at the airport. People might be late. Interpreter doesn't show up. A lot of things happen. So I think you just have to be flexible and just enjoy the experience. And you're not that important. Don't think you're such a big person that you can't, fumble through a presentation without a translator, or there's no handouts. There's nothing to copy there. So you have to be creative, use sign language, visual cues, but definitely don't take yourself seriously. But also, I think you have to know something to teach. So get out there and practice. If you're new, you help with lab assisting. Go to a course. Help. Hey, can I just interact? How do I teach? Take a student. Be a clinical instructor. That really helps. What they're looking for is a lot of times is CIs in these countries, people that can practice in front of you and then get feedback right away. So get used to giving feedback to people. Yeah, I think what you said was perfect. But just don't take yourself too seriously.
I really like this common theme that you guys keep bringing up throughout this podcast is being open-minded. I think that is, and Mike, I think you made a really good point as far as some of the social media issues that have been going on lately with especially global physical therapists is, we got to be listening to each other. We have to keep an open mind, and we have to do that when we're communicating these things with the people that we're teaching. So I really appreciate both Mike and Ricardo, those comments, because that seems to be a common theme that I'm noticing with this episode.
Absolutely. And I will second that. And, guys, just because for someone, maybe even a student, newer clinician, or even a regular clinician who's perhaps looking to get involved, they've kind of done some research like, okay, I found an independent organization that's going to help this. I got to be honest, one of the first things that comes to my mind regarding this is funding, especially with students coming out. Students have a lot of debt. There's also salary constraints with being a clinician necessarily. So first of all, I guess my first question is, how much on average does it cost to do a trip like this? And what are some finance tips that you guys would recommend to people interested in doing this to be able to do that in the most cost-efficient way?
I can say from 3 trips, or about to be 3 trips to China, I think the most I've spent on any one trip is about $100. There are ways and mechanisms of funding governments, largely that have an interest in advancing the skills of their practitioners, especially when it's government-funded hospitals, are pretty generous My first trip to Shanghai, we flew the equivalent of what would be Spirit Airlines internationally. So it was a very humbling experience, but it was paid for, so it was good. This second trip and this most recent trip, the hospital in Xi'an is flying us United Polaris business class, which is nice, very nice. But the Chinese government fully funds the trip. So I think looking at, yes, you can be the funding source. There are organizations that do that, but making collaborations and connections with organizations like hospitals and things like that, especially to Ricardo's point, in countries where the hospitals are government funded or government ran, the government has much like in the US, as a vested interest in training their practitioners to meet the needs of their society. And in many instances, maybe it's not first class that you're flying, but there are opportunities. And a lot of times it's kind of I don't want to say quid pro quo, but it's kind of you're going to do that lecture and not expect an honorarium or some sort of payment. Your payment is the ability to be able to go to a country, share your knowledge, and get your trip fully funded. And I think that's the other thing I would encourage existing professionals, new professionals, students, get away from the mindset of I have to be paid for everything I do. A lot of it can be, more or less that exchange. I was given a trip that was very generous. And in exchange, I'm going to go and I'm going to share my knowledge base and impart some hopefully words of wisdom into their practice. And we both benefit. You get to go to a very unfamiliar place and get to see. I would have never gotten to see the Terracotta Warriors, and I'll be honest, that wasn't even on my bucket list. And I'm sure Ricardo has a bunch of experiences like that too. And now, as a result of that, was given an ability to be a tourist for a day and to get a really cool trip experience out of a couple hours worth of my time in sharing my knowledge base. So, really just, again, be open-minded, be open to the possibility of collaboration, be open to the idea that, things come in many different forms in terms of compensation. Sometimes it's live chickens, sometimes it's plaque, sometimes it's all kinds of things. I've come back with gifts that I would have I would have never bought this, but I really appreciate the fact that this was a gift and that they thought enough of me to share this. I think at the end of the day, just remember, that we're helping not just our global colleagues, but we're also helping the patients they serve. And that's actually a pretty cool perspective when you sit back and you say, I'm impacting healthcare delivery models in another country. Like, never in my wildest imagination would I have woken up today and said I would have given the opportunity to do that. And it's actually really humbling when you sit back and think about that.
Yeah. A lot of trips that I go on, Michael's a lot smarter than me with getting the funding. I usually just pay for them because the ones I go to are very, very poor. So even if it's just airfare is expensive. If you go to Ethiopia, it's a couple $1,000s, and shots. I get every immunization possible. Whatever I might get, I don't want to get any diseases. So that could cost you up to $1,000. Insurance doesn't usually cover those too much. So some places like Vietnam, very affordable. The hotel I stayed at was the hospital room. So I was in a hospital, in a room, and the housekeeper was in the room, kind of sharing the same bathroom. So it was kind of awkward, but it was about $5 a night is all it cost. So it was about $75 total. Food in Vietnam, very, very affordable. The Vietnamese dong is about 32,000 to 1. So you go out to eat and it's 25,000, but that's like 75 cents. So that's all you can eat for 75 cents. So once you get in country, it's very affordable. What I found is you just got to get there, get your shots. It's expensive, but housing is usually included, and meals. Typically, people want to take you out and show you. So you don't really have to reach in your wallet too much, and the food is very affordable. But there are ways to fundraise. I'm sure, like GoFundMe or tell your friends. Supply is another thing, costs money. I try to bring as many supplies as I can. So I ask around, anyone got any old walkers they don't want? I try to load them in, anything, TheraBand, some things. I have some type of gift to give to people, but that all costs. But it's definitely worth it. You get so much out of it. So yes, you have to pay for airfare or your shots, but you really walk out of there getting a lot more out of it than I think you put in. Like Michael seeing the terracotta warriors, and I get to see the pyramids or whatever is local they want to show me, the volcanoes. It's really special when they take the time to show you around, and it's definitely worth the investment.
I'm sure. I mean, it just sounds remarkable. I mean, all those pros and what you guys have experienced. So say for a clinician who's looking, I know, Ricardo, you had mentioned the organization that you go through primarily. What are some other organizations that maybe newer and existing professionals can kind of even start to research if they kind of want to look more into this, like to kind of look for some of these opportunities?
Yeah, Global Medical Brigades is one that has different ones. We were just in Nicaragua, and the students by locals college got together, and it was what's the name of that one? Viva Nicaragua. And so that's real nice. We had 40 students go over there. The cost there, airfare, we stayed in homes with people, and they cooked for us, very affordable. It was $1,000 for 10 days, and that included everything. So that's an organization you can look at. You can look at Health Volunteers Overseas. That one, typically, there is housing that's provided, but the transfer is still there. The airport and all that kind of stuff still costs. But those are the three big ones that I would use, but there's plenty out there.
And if, Scott, you mentioned Stand Haiti, I mean, there's a lot of great. Justin Dunaway's doing some amazing work there. I know Richard Jackson up in the Jackson clinics up in the Virginia region does a lot of outreach to Kenya and Western Africa through different volunteer opportunities. So I think it's just, you have to get out there and find what's out in the world. You figure out, I think step one, where you want to serve, or what part of the world you really want to focus on. If it's Africa, if it's Asia, if it's South America, if it's Central America, kind of identify that region first and foremost. 1B, try to start to identify some organizations or potential outreach that could connect you to that part of the world. I think the other thing is recognize early on if a visa is needed to travel there. That was an eye-opening experience for me. I'm like, wait, I need a visa to travel to China? Yeah, you do. And there's a lot of countries that do have that requirement. Some that will give you an open-ended, like I have a 10-year tourist visa to be able to go to China anytime in the next 10 years to teach, or you get a visa for a very defined period of time and purpose. Knowing what those rules are like, knowing what the climate of the country is like, or of the region, and kind of learning about that, and making sure that all of those kind of bullets are checked before you say, I'm just going to go off in this direction. And then I think look for funding. I'm amazed at how many different opportunities are out there, not just, self-funding, but then the GoFundMe, the Kickstarters, I think more and more what we're actually looking to do as an organization this year is actually put money towards one of our employees that want to do some sort of medical mission. Not just that, they have their PTO and things like that they take for time off, but that, here's a stipend that we're willing to give as an organization to this individual that's willing to take their time, put their resources into this, and go serve someone overseas. It's a great way to give back, like we said, not just to the profession, but to the communities that they serve. So just a couple thoughts.
No, I really like that. And I think this discussion has really been quite fascinating, really learning. I thank you both for sharing your experiences with that. And, we normally like to ask this final question at the end of every episode, because of course, this podcast is called the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. So the question is, if you could change one aspect of healthcare education, which aspect would you change? And how would you change it? And Ricardo, I do know you've answered this one in the past. Mm-hmm. So if you'd like to keep that same answer or maybe add in your number 2, that might be a way to go for it. But Mike, how about you first?
So the one thing I would change is a better appreciation for global culture and global practice of physiotherapy. I mean, I think we have a very insular view, and it's blinded and biased by the way we practice here. And surely that must be the way we practice everywhere. Like everywhere, to Ricardo's point, has a clinic, and you have a bunch of fitness equipment in that clinic, and you have cash-based PT, and you have all these things that are available to you. And I think more of the appreciation at the program level to say, the way physical therapy exists in the US is a way. And just like Baskin Robbins, there's 50 different varieties out there, or more than that, of the way that physical therapy exists in other countries. So I think I would like to see a better, more intentional effort to educate our new grads and our students about what global physio looks like, and then encourage these international collaborations. I mean, if you would have, I've been a PT for 15 years. If you would have told me 15 years ago that I would have been to China twice and I'm about to go back, I would have said no. Not only at that point in time did I not have an interest, I wasn't thinking academic, I wasn't thinking about teaching, and I wasn't thinking about that as an even opportunity. And now to have, the possibilities, and I'm outlining other potential opportunities to go and have those experiences. If I would have had more of an appreciation at my developmental stage of, these are opportunities that are out there if you're willing to put yourself out there and take part in them. I think I would have been better off as a result of it. And I think you do have, like the three of y'all, there are people in every cohort, in every class that just rise to the top. They do amazing things. You guys are doing amazing, transformative things with this podcast, and I applaud you. And I think those are the type of people we need to identify in entry-level programs. We need to give them the tools to be successful, to help them realize what their dreams and aspirations are. And we need to show them what those opportunities are like, and then get it out of their way and let them do amazing things.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. And there's a lot more to physical therapy than being in the clinic. Service-oriented, pro bono clinics, there's definitely opportunities out there where hopefully students can get involved and do some treatment outside their clinicals. Maybe some service areas. If you like veterans, for example, you could volunteer at a veterans home and push the wheelchair around, get help with transfers, get to see about different disabilities. Or global, if opportunities arise where you could take your class to Nicaragua. I know the school I went with, they couldn't use the name of the school because liability and all. Everyone's afraid of getting sued or someone getting hurt. So I could see there's definitely some problems, but hopefully have little clubs, like an international club, or let's talk about China. Maybe let's talk about Ethiopia, somewhere. Maybe they'll be interested in getting people together, raising some money and going. And a little bit that they know as a student makes a big difference for people in those countries. You don't have to have your license yet. You go over there, there's no HIPAA. You could take pictures. You could talk about patients and other professional caregivers. So it's a lot different, but hopefully that'd be something that we could add to the program, have an elective or some time put aside or some options. Hey, if you're really interested in this, try this. Look at this route. So I like Michael's answer. I thought that was really good to try to get the students even aware. I think awareness isn't there. Unless you know someone that went on a trip, you're not going to even know this opportunity exists.
Well, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of students that at that time are really so focused on just getting through their clinicals, getting through school, getting ready for boards, and just really trying to get through the program. And it's easy, at least from my personal perspective, it's easy to not put as much emphasis or thought on some of those other aspects because you're like, I got to focus on this at the time being. But I really like that point that you guys both bring up and reinforce that, schools cannot teach everything in the short time that they have. They have accreditation standards. They have standards that they have to adhere for the board exam. There's some things that are limiting that. But I think if we can expose students to these options and say, here's this, it exists. If you want to further it more, here's how you can do it. And I think that is key, that I think that students and even clinicians for that matter, to just be overall globally aware of these international opportunities. So I really value that answer. Well, guys, I can't tell you again how thankful I am and we are here at HET for you guys coming on to share your perspective. And
where can people find you online or on social media should they have a question for either of you guys about what we've talked about or about your experience further?
I'm on Facebook, Ricardo A. Fernandez, otherwise email fernandez23@usa.net.
I'm on Twitter at mconnorspt, Instagram at mconnorspt03, Facebook at Michael Connors, and email mjconnorspt@gmail.com.
Well, thanks guys for joining us, and it's been a joy to have you on. Good luck with all that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Access to healthcare is one of the largest issues facing both providers and patients, as millions of people worldwide lack timely and affordable access to healthcare. Anywhere Healthcare, a telehealth platform, is a simple, low-cost option for providers and patients that eliminates the barriers to access to all kinds of healthcare. To find out more, check out anywhere.healthcare, which is available in our show notes. And if you use the code HET in all caps when you email to sign up, you'll save 25% off the total cost. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.